Not ALLOWED tourists wants to try to touch the horse. It was a bright and sunny morning at the famous historical site, one of the most visited places in the country. The stone pathways were worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and the ancient walls held the echoes of countless stories. Tourists from all over the world had gathered to see the spectacle for which this place was famous. The majestic horses that patrolled the grounds, part of a long tradition that had lasted generations. These horses were not just animals, they were symbols of history, discipline, and pride. Their shiny coats glistened under the sun, and their strong, steady movements gave everyone a sense of awe. Among the crowd was a horse handler named Armin. He had been working with these horses for over 15 years. For him, each horse was like a member of his family. He knew their habits, their quirks, and even the smallest signs of discomfort. To Armin, the horses were not props for photos, nor were they there to be touched by curious tourists. They were working animals, trained to maintain order in the busy tourist area, and their safety, as well as the safety of the visitors, depended on respect and careful behavior. The rules of the site were very clear. Signs were posted at every entrance and along the main pathways. Do not touch the horses, keep a safe distance, and respect the animals. These signs were not decorative, they were there to prevent accidents. Yet despite the warnings, Armin often saw tourists ignoring them. Some would walk up too close, reaching out to stroke a horse's neck without a thought. Others would try to feed them snacks, thinking the gesture was harmless. Every time this happened, Armin felt a mixture of worry and frustration. He had seen incidents where a horse had reacted badly to sudden touch, kicking, biting, or running off, and it could lead to serious injury. On this particular morning, the site was busier than usual. Families with children, groups of students, and travelers with cameras filled the pathways. The horses were stationed in their usual areas, standing patiently as visitors admired them from a distance. One horse in particular, a large brown stallion named Sultan, drew the attention of nearly everyone. Sultan had a calm and dignified presence, with a long mane that shone in the sunlight. He was well trained, but Armin knew that even the calmest horse could startle if provoked. As the tourists wandered closer, Armin watched carefully. A family of 4 approached Sultan, the children excitedly pointing and whispering to each other. Their parents held phones and cameras, eager to capture the perfect picture. The children leaned slightly forward, giggling as they tried to imagine what it would feel like to touch the horse. Armin stepped closer, clearing his throat to get their attention. "Please, keep a safe distance," he said gently but firmly. "Do not touch the horse. He is a working animal and can be dangerous if frightened." The parents nodded, saying polite thanks, and the family moved slightly back. Armin relaxed for a moment, relieved that they had listened. Nearby, another group of tourists was less cautious. They were laughing and joking, moving quickly from one horse to another. One of them, a young man with a camera slung around his neck, crouched down to get a low-angle shot. "Just one quick touch," he whispered to his friends, pointing at Sultan. His friends giggled, nodding in agreement. Armin's heart sank. He could see the tension building in Sultan, whose ears flicked back slightly as he sensed the movement. Horses are highly sensitive animals. Even a small, unexpected action can make them nervous. Armin knew that what might seem like a harmless gesture could turn into a dangerous situation in seconds. The sun climbed higher, casting warm golden light across the cobbled stones. Tourists continued to move around, some stopping to admire the scenery, others rushing to catch a glimpse of the horses. Armin walked alongside Sultan, keeping a careful watch. He spoke softly to the horse, patting him gently on the shoulder. Sultan's large eyes followed Armin, calm and trusting, yet alert. The bond between a horse and its handler is built on years of understanding, and Armin had earned Sultan's trust with patience and care. Despite the signs and repeated warnings, many tourists seemed to ignore the rules. Some would stand just a few feet away, stretching out their hands as if to invite the horse closer. Others whispered to each other, daring one another to get closer for a photograph. Armin felt a familiar sense of tension rise. He had learned that arguing loudly rarely worked. It often made tourists defensive. Instead, he moved quietly, positioning himself between the horse and the crowd, using his presence to guide people back to a safe distance. He thought back to one particular incident a few months earlier. A tourist had reached out to touch another horse, startling it so much that it reared on its hind legs. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but the horse had kicked out, damaging part of the fence. Since that day, Armin had been even more vigilant. He understood that people did not mean harm. They simply did not realize the consequences of their actions. Education and awareness were just as important as caution. Children were especially unpredictable. One little girl had been tugging at her mother's hand, wanting to touch Sultan. The mother held her back firmly, explaining that the horse could get scared. The child's eyes filled with curiosity and a hint of disappointment. Armin crouched slightly to meet her gaze, smiling gently. "He's beautiful, isn't he?" he said. "But we have to respect him by giving him space. That way he stays happy and safe, and we stay safe too." The girl nodded slowly, understanding more than she had at first, and backed away a few steps. Moments like these reminded Armin why his job mattered, not just to protect the horses, but to teach people how to coexist with them respectfully. Throughout the morning, Armin noticed a pattern. Most tourists were respectful if reminded calmly, but a few were determined to get as close as possible. They seemed to view the horses as props for entertainment rather than sentient beings with their own needs. Armin sighed quietly to himself. He had read stories of accidents at other tourist sites, where people had suffered serious injuries because they ignored basic rules. He knew it could happen here too if someone wasn't careful. As the crowd grew, Armin maintained a steady presence. He moved deliberately, keeping the tourists in sight without appearing threatening. The horses, sensing his confidence and calm, remained composed. Armin spoke softly to each horse, offering reassurance and gentle guidance. They responded with small shifts of weight, flicks of ears, and relaxed movements. It was a delicate balance, one that required experience, patience, and constant attention. By mid-morning, the area had become a busy mix of humans and animals. Tourists paused to take photographs, children pointed and laughed, and the horses continued their patrol, moving gracefully between groups of visitors. Armin's eyes never left them for long. He knew that one careless step, one sudden reach, could change everything. And yet, despite the constant vigilance, there was beauty in the scene, a harmony that could exist when humans and animals respected one another. As he walked alongside Sultan, Armin reflected on the lessons he had learned over the years. Horses, like people, respond to kindness, understanding, and respect. A moment of carelessness could lead to injury, fear, or loss of trust. And while tourists might see the horses as a chance for a photo or a brief touch, Armin knew that the real story was about connection, patience, and responsibility. The rules were not meant to be annoying. They were a guide to keeping everyone safe. The morning passed, and the crowd slowly began to thin. Tourists moved toward cafes, gift shops, and other attractions, leaving behind only the echoes of laughter and conversation. Armin took a deep breath, feeling the relief that comes after guiding people safely through a challenging situation. He patted Sultan gently, murmuring words of praise. The horse nuzzled his shoulder in response, calm and content. For Armin, moments like this were the reward, seeing the animals safe, visitors learning, and the ancient tradition continuing without harm. Even as the sight quieted, Armin knew it would not last. New tourists would arrive soon, eager to see the horses and perhaps tempted to touch them despite the rules. But for now, the morning had been successful. Everyone had learned something, some through words, others through observation, and the horses had remained unharmed. It was a reminder of the delicate balance between curiosity and caution, excitement and respect. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Armin prepared himself for the next group, ready to continue the work that he had loved for so many years. As the morning unfolded, a new group of tourists arrived at the historic site. They were a small group, 3 friends traveling together, carrying backpacks and cameras. They had heard so much about the famous horses that patrolling the grounds was a must-see on their list. Excited, they hurried through the stone pathways, pointing at the old walls, the arches, and the carefully preserved courtyards. Their chatter was loud and energetic, full of laughter and curiosity. Among them, one young man, Daniel, seemed especially eager. He had seen countless photos online of the majestic horses, and he wanted to capture the perfect picture. He imagined himself standing next to the horse, gently touching its mane, as though he were part of the scene he had admired for so long. His friends, Sarah and Leo, were equally excited, but they were a little more cautious. They noticed the signs and read the instructions carefully. Do not touch the horses. Keep a safe distance. But Daniel's excitement grew stronger than caution. Just a little touch, he whispered, nudging his friends. It will be fine. The horse looks calm. Sarah and Leo hesitated. They had heard stories about accidents with horses at tourist sites, but Daniel's enthusiasm was contagious. Slowly, they followed him closer to Sultan, the large brown stallion that had been the center of attention earlier. Armin, who had been keeping a careful watch, noticed the new group immediately. He could sense Daniel's curiosity and the potential for trouble. The young man moved a little too quickly, trying to get a better angle for his photo. Armin stepped closer to intercept them, raising his hand to get their attention. Please, keep your distance, Armin said, his voice calm but firm. These are working horses. You must not touch them. Daniel smiled nervously. Oh, we'll be careful. We just want a quick photo. Armin shook his head. A photo is fine, but touching is not allowed. Horses can get frightened very easily. One wrong move and someone could get hurt. Sarah and Leo nodded, clearly understanding, but Daniel's eyes remained fixed on Sultan. The horse stood tall and graceful, his large eyes watching the group with curiosity. To Daniel, Sultan looked so calm and friendly that it seemed impossible he could be dangerous. He inched forward, ignoring the distance Armin had suggested. Armin sighed. He had faced this situation many times before. It was always the same pattern. People admired the horses, then their excitement overpowered their caution. He took a few careful steps closer to Sultan, positioning himself between the horse and the tourists. His presence was meant to guide them back without frightening the horse. You need to step back, please, Armin said again. Horses can react suddenly. Even a small touch can startle them. Daniel's friends moved back slightly, but Daniel reached out just a little. His hand hovered near Sultan's neck. The horse flinched slightly, ears flicking back. Daniel froze, realizing something had changed. Sultan's calm demeanor was giving way to alertness. Armin stepped even closer, his voice steady but firmer this time. Stop right there. Do not touch him. Daniel's heart raced. He had not expected the horse to react. He quickly withdrew his hand and smiled nervously. Okay, I won't touch him. Sultan shifted his weight, letting out a soft snort, signaling his discomfort. The other tourists in the area noticed the tension and instinctively took a few steps back. The horses are highly sensitive to human movement, and even the slightest misstep could have caused panic. Armin gently patted Sultan on the shoulder, whispering words of reassurance. The horse relaxed slightly, though his ears remained alert. Daniel's friends were quiet now, watching the interaction closely. He's really beautiful, Sarah whispered. I didn't know horses could get so tense. Yes, Armin said, overhearing her. They are powerful and intelligent animals. They feel everything around them. That's why we need to respect them. The tourists moved back a few more steps, giving Sultan the space he needed. Daniel finally understood the lesson, his initial excitement replaced by a mixture of awe and respect. He realized that these animals were not props for photos. They were living beings with their own feelings, instincts, and limits. Armin continued to guide the group, explaining gently about the horses' behavior. He told them how the animals were trained, how they could sense fear or sudden movements, and why even experienced handlers like him had to be cautious. The tourists listened intently. Their initial excitement was replaced by curiosity and learning. They began asking questions about the horses' diet, training, and daily routines. Armin answered each one with patience, proud that the young visitors were beginning to understand. Meanwhile, the other horses on the grounds moved gracefully among the crowds, guided by their handlers. Children giggled as they watched, parents snapped photos, and the historic sight buzzed with energy. Yet through it all, Armin's eyes never left the new group. He knew that Daniel might still be tempted to reach out. As they walked alongside Sultan, Armin shared a story from his early days as a handler. He told them about an incident years ago when a visitor had ignored the rules. The horse had reared in fear, and the visitor had fallen. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured, but the event had left a lasting impression on Armin. He explained that these moments were not about punishment, but about learning and respect. Horses, he said, were loyal and trusting, but that trust could be broken in an instant by careless actions. Daniel listened carefully, now fully aware of the responsibility that came with being near these animals. He felt a mixture of guilt and fascination. He had come thinking it would be fun to touch a horse, but now he realized how much knowledge, patience, and respect were involved. "I understand now," he said softly. "I'll be more careful." Armin nodded, satisfied. "That's good. Remember, it's not just about your safety. It's about theirs too. Respect and space keep everyone safe." The group continued their walk through the site, Daniel taking photos from a safe distance, capturing Sultan's elegance without risking harm. Sarah and Leo were visibly more relaxed now, appreciating the horses' beauty without trying to get too close. They noticed how each animal moved with a unique grace, responding to their handlers with gentle obedience and quiet intelligence. As the morning went on, Armin saw other tourists behaving similarly. Some followed the rules immediately, while a few tested the boundaries, curious about what might happen. But with careful guidance, explanations, and gentle corrections, most learned quickly. The tension that had built when Daniel reached out dissipated, replaced by calm appreciation. The horses continued their patrol, walking steadily, their hooves clicking softly against the stone pathways. By late morning, the crowd had grown larger, but the lesson of respect had begun to spread. Even those who initially ignored the rules seemed more aware of the horses' presence and their feelings. Armin walked alongside Sultan, quietly observing the interactions, proud of the patience and understanding he had seen develop. He knew that every visitor who left with a new understanding had taken something valuable with them. Not just a photo, but a lesson about coexistence, responsibility, and care for living beings. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel, Sarah, and Leo joined a small group of visitors watching a demonstration. The horses moved gracefully, performing trained maneuvers with precision and calmness. Armin explained each movement, emphasizing how training, respect, and trust worked together. Daniel watched Sultan carefully, now fully engaged with the experience. He realized that he had learned more than just the danger of touching the horse. He had learned about the dedication, knowledge, and care that went into every aspect of the animals' lives. By the time the group prepared to leave, Daniel, Sarah, and Leo had changed. Their initial excitement had transformed into admiration and respect. They thanked Armin for his patience and explanations, understanding the importance of rules and the responsibility of being near animals. As they walked away, Daniel glanced back at Sultan one last time, smiling. He felt a quiet pride in having learned something important, a lesson he would remember far beyond the boundaries of the historic site. For Armin, the morning had been a success. Another group had learned the same lesson he had taught countless times before. Curiosity is natural, but respect is essential. The horses remained calm and unharmed. The visitors left with a story of learning, and the delicate balance between humans and animals had been preserved. It was a small victory, but one that mattered deeply in the ongoing effort to protect and respect the living history of the site. The day had grown warmer, and the historic site was now buzzing with tourists. Families wandered along the cobbled pathways, children ran ahead excitedly, and cameras clicked everywhere. The horses, trained and disciplined, moved steadily among the crowds, their handlers walking closely to guide them. Among the bustling visitors, Daniel, Sarah, and Leo continued to explore, still fascinated by the horses but now fully respecting the rules. Yet, not everyone shared their understanding. A new group of tourists approached, loud and boisterous, carrying backpacks, cameras, and snacks. They were unfamiliar with the customs of the site and paid little attention to the warning signs posted at every entrance. One young man, taller than the others, had a mischievous curiosity. He kept glancing at Sultan, the calm brown stallion, and whispered to his friends, "I just want to see if he's really that friendly. How dangerous could it be?" His friends laughed nervously. They had read the signs but seemed tempted by the thrill of approaching such a majestic animal. The group edged closer, moving quickly through the crowd, almost bumping into other tourists. Their excitement was obvious, and it caught Armin's attention immediately. His trained eyes noticed the tension building in Sultan as the group approached. Horses are perceptive. They can sense fear, uncertainty, or sudden movements, and this group was making both. Armin stepped in quickly, positioning himself between Sultan and the tourists. He raised his voice, calm but firm, to get their attention. "Please keep your distance. Do not touch the horse. He is a working animal and can react if startled." The young man laughed lightly, waving his hand as if dismissing the warning. "We'll be careful." "Just a little closer for a picture." Armin's expression tightened. He had seen this behavior before, and it almost always ended in tension or danger. He took a step closer to Sultan, patting the horse gently, whispering words of reassurance. Sultan's large eyes flicked toward the approaching tourists, ears twitching nervously. The horse shifted his weight slightly, a warning signal that he was uneasy. The young man ignored the warning and leaned forward, stretching his hand toward Sultan's mane. His friends laughed, encouraging him. "Go on, just touch him quickly," one whispered. "It'll be fine, see?" Armin's heart raced. He knew that even a single touch at the wrong moment could startle Sultan. Horses, while calm and trained, are strong animals capable of sudden movement. A frightened horse could rear, kick, or bolt, and in a crowded tourist area the consequences could be serious. He raised both hands, stepping directly in front of the young man. "Stop! Do not touch him," Armin shouted, his voice sharper than usual. His tone carried authority, and some tourists nearby paused to watch, sensing the rising tension. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. The young man's hand hovered in the air, inches from Sultan's mane. Sultan's ears pinned slightly, nostrils flaring as he sensed the sudden approach. The horse let out a soft, sharp snort, signaling his discomfort. Even the air seemed heavy with anticipation, and the other tourists backed away instinctively. Daniel, Sarah, and Leo, who had been watching from a distance, felt their hearts race. Daniel whispered to his friends, "This could get bad fast. I'm glad we stayed back earlier." Armin's eyes never left Sultan. He moved slowly and deliberately, placing his body between the horse and the tourists, guiding Sultan's attention away from the approaching hand. He whispered softly to the horse, "It's okay, stay calm," gently rubbing his shoulder. Sultan responded with a small, cautious shift of weight, but he was still alert and tense. The young man's friends, realizing the horse was not as calm as they assumed, finally hesitated. One whispered, "Maybe we shouldn't, he doesn't look happy." But the lead tourist stubbornly leaned closer, convinced he could get a quick touch. He stretched out his fingers towards Sultan again, ignoring the slight movement of the horse and the firm presence of Armin. Suddenly, Sultan moved his head quickly to the side, startled by the approaching hand. The motion was swift, instinctive. Tourists gasped, and a few children froze in place, clutching their parents' hands. Armin reacted immediately, guiding the horse's head away and keeping the young man at a safe distance. The tension in the air was palpable. "Do not come closer," Armin said sharply, his voice commanding attention. "These are not toys. They are living animals. You can get seriously hurt if you do not respect them." The young man stumbled back slightly, startled by the sudden reaction. For a moment, he looked genuinely surprised, perhaps realizing the seriousness of the situation for the first time. Sultan's ears remained pinned, his body tense, but he had not acted aggressively, thanks to Armin's quick intervention. Nearby tourists whispered among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Armin, others visibly shaken by how close the situation had become. The young man's friends pulled him back gently, murmuring, okay, we'll stop." Armin exhaled slowly, his body relaxing slightly but his attention still sharp. He patted Sultan on the neck, murmuring words of praise and reassurance. "Good boy, you stayed calm. Everything is okay now." Sultan's ears flicked forward slightly, the tension in his body easing as he trusted Armin's guidance. The group of tourists moved back, sheepish and quieter now. The young man, once so eager to touch the horse, finally understood the potential danger. He glanced at Sultan with a mixture of awe and respect, nodding slowly. I didn't realize," he said quietly. "He's powerful." "Yes," Armin replied, his voice calm again. "And he is also sensitive. That's why the rules exist. Not to spoil your fun, but to keep both you and the horse safe. Even a small mistake can be dangerous." The other tourists nodded, realizing the wisdom in his words. Children who had been watching from nearby clutched their parents, hands a little tighter, observing the interaction carefully. Some parents whispered explanations about why animals needed space, turning the incident into a small lesson for their children. Daniel, Sarah, and Leo exchanged glances. Daniel whispered to his friends, "I'm glad we didn't try to touch him earlier. That could have been bad." Armin guided Sultan back into a more open area, away from the crowd where the horse could relax. He explained to the remaining nearby tourists how horses communicate their discomfort, through ears, tail movements, and subtle body language. The visitors listened intently, fascinated. They began to see the horses not just as attractions but as living beings with intelligence and emotions. The young man who had tried to reach out earlier approached Armin cautiously. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to scare him. I just wanted to see how it felt." Armin nodded. "It's okay. Many people don't understand at first. What matters is that you learned. Respect is the most important thing. Horses, like humans, have limits. When we honor them, everyone stays safe." Sultan, sensing that the situation was now calm, lowered his head slightly, his body relaxing as he walked alongside Armin. The other horses moved nearby, continuing their patrol, unbothered by the previous incident. The crowd resumed its normal pace, and the tension gradually faded. By late morning, Armin reflected on the near accident. It was a reminder that curiosity, while natural, needed to be tempered with understanding and respect. He had saved the situation, but it could have turned dangerous in seconds. He thought about all the lessons he had learned over his years as a handler, realizing that each day brought new challenges. Even the calmest horses could become tense if humans did not follow the rules. The young tourist who had caused the near incident stayed nearby for a while, observing Sultan from a safe distance. They took photos carefully, now more aware of how to behave around animals. Their excitement had not diminished, it had simply transformed into appreciation and respect. Armin smiled quietly to himself, proud that the lesson had been understood. As the sun climbed higher, the site continued to hum with energy. Families, students, and travelers moved through the stone pathways, many now aware of how to behave near the horses. Armin continued his careful watch, always ready to step in when needed. He knew that patience, understanding, and education were as important as any rule or sign. By the end of the morning, the tension of the earlier incident had completely faded. Sultan and the other horses continued their patrols, calm and confident, while the tourists learned a valuable lesson. The moment of near danger had turned into an opportunity for learning, a reminder that respect for animals is essential and curiosity must be balanced with caution. Armin glanced around the site, observing the tourists' interactions, and felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Today had been another successful morning. The horses were safe, visitors had learned, and the tradition of respect and care for these majestic animals continued. For everyone present, the incident was a small but powerful lesson in understanding the intelligence, sensitivity, and strength of horses. It was a reminder that excitement and curiosity were natural, but respect and caution were necessary. And as the crowd dispersed for a midday break, Armin and Sultan continued their patrol, ready for whatever challenges the afternoon might bring. By midday, the historic site had begun to quiet down. The sun shone brightly over the cobbled pathways, casting warm patterns on the ancient stone walls. Tourists strolled leisurely now, some taking a break at small benches, while others paused at the souvenir shops. The morning's excitement had passed, but the memory of the tense encounter with Sultan lingered in the minds of several visitors. The group of tourists who had earlier tried to touch Sultan now walked slowly through the area, their earlier laughter subdued. The young man who had reached out, still feeling the adrenaline of the moment, looked down at his hands as if realizing their potential danger. His friends whispered quietly among themselves, reviewing what had happened and replaying the scene in their minds. The incident that had seemed like a small thrill had suddenly revealed its seriousness. Armin continued to patrol with Sultan, observing the crowd carefully. His experience taught him that even after an incident, people often needed time to process what had occurred. Today was no different. He noticed that the young tourists were keeping a safe distance now, their eyes following Sultan's calm movements as if seeing the horse in a new light. "Did you see how quickly he reacted?" Sarah, one of the young man's friends, whispered softly to the others. "Just a small hand movement and he got startled. Imagine if he had kicked." Leo nodded solemnly. "I think we didn't realize how powerful he is and how careful we needed to be. That could have ended badly." The young man, Daniel, he had been unusually quiet since the morning, finally spoke. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said, his voice low. "I thought he was calm and I thought it would be safe to touch him for just a second, but I was wrong. I didn't understand." Armin overheard the conversation and walked over. He smiled gently, keeping his tone calm and encouraging. "It's okay," he said. "Many people don't understand at first. The important thing is that you learned. Horses are intelligent and sensitive. They feel what's happening around them. That moment showed you how easily things can go wrong." The young tourists nodded, their faces serious now. They had entered the site with excitement and curiosity, but the incident had transformed that excitement into awareness. Daniel, in particular, felt a strong sense of respect for Sultan. He realized that animals, even calm and trained ones, are not entertainment props. They are living beings with their own instincts, feelings, and boundaries. "Every day," Armin continued, "I see visitors who don't understand. They think a horse is safe because it stands still. But one sudden movement, one wrong gesture, and the animal could react. We are lucky today that nothing happened. That horse trusts me because of years of care, and now he trusts you a little too because you respected him afterward." The young man's friends exchanged glances, their previous excitement replaced with reflection. "I feel bad we didn't listen sooner," Sarah admitted. "I didn't think it would be such a serious thing." Armin nodded. "It's natural to be curious. Curiosity is good, but it must be balanced with respect. That's the lesson everyone should remember when near animals. Respect keeps both humans and animals safe." Meanwhile, other tourists had noticed the group's change in behavior. Some who had previously ignored the rules began paying more attention to the signs around the site. Parents used the opportunity to explain to their children why keeping distance from animals was necessary. Children, wide-eyed with curiosity, listened carefully as their parents shared the story of the morning's near incident. In a quiet corner, a small family had gathered. The father spoke softly to his two children. "See that horse? He's big and strong. That's why we need to watch from here. If we scare him, he could get upset. That's why rules exist, to protect us and him." The children nodded, holding onto each other's hands. They glanced towards Sultan, who stood calmly near Armin, watching the crowd with a gentle, intelligent gaze. The family began to understand that rules were not meant to annoy them, but to teach responsibility and care for living beings. Back with the young tourists, Daniel continued to reflect. He had come to the site eager to touch the horse, thinking it would be harmless fun. But the near accident had changed his perspective completely. He thought about what could have happened, how a horse's kick or sudden movement could have injured someone, or even caused a chain reaction in the crowded area. He felt a deep respect for the animal's strength and the years of training that had kept him calm and disciplined. "I never thought a moment of curiosity could turn into something dangerous," Daniel admitted to Armin. "I just wanted to get close, but now I see it's about trust and respect, not just fun." "That's right," Armin replied. "Trust and respect are the most important things." Horses can sense fear, hesitation, and sudden movements. They respond to the energy around them. By respecting their space, you show care, and that builds trust. The group stayed for a while longer, observing Sultan from a safe distance. They watched as he walked gracefully among the crowds, responding to Armin's quiet guidance. The horse moved with elegance, yet there was a silent strength in his posture. Every visitor nearby seemed to notice the difference between the horses who were respected and those who were approached too carelessly. As the young tourists walked toward a nearby cafe for a short break, Daniel turned back one last time to look at Sultan. He felt a sense of gratitude and humility. He had learned a lesson that went beyond the rules. It was about understanding and valuing the lives of other creatures. Armin watched them leave, satisfied that the lesson had been absorbed. He reflected on the many years he had spent as a horse handler. Every incident, whether minor or serious, taught him something about people, animals, and the delicate balance between them. Today had been a reminder of how curiosity could turn into awareness, and how awareness could lead to respect. Later in the afternoon, the young tourists shared their experience with other visitors. They described how the horse had reacted, how Armin had intervened, and what they had learned about patience, trust, and care. Other tourists listened, intrigued by the story. Many admitted that they had also been tempted to get too close to the horses in the past, but hearing this first-hand account made them reconsider their behavior. Parents in particular used the story as a teaching moment for their children. "See," one mother said, pointing to the cobblestone pathway, "even if a horse looks calm, we can't just touch it. We have to follow the rules or someone could get hurt." By late afternoon, the site had quieted considerably. The crowds had thinned, leaving only a few visitors strolling along the historic pathways. The young tourists who had earlier caused the tension were now thoughtful and quieter, moving carefully and observing the horses with a new level of understanding. They realized that their actions could have had serious consequences, and they felt grateful that nothing worse had happened. Daniel, in particular, felt a change within himself. The day had begun with excitement and curiosity, but it ended with reflection and awareness. He realized that true appreciation of animals was not about touching or controlling them. It was about understanding their nature, respecting their space, and valuing their strength and intelligence. Armin walked alongside Sultan, patting him gently. "You stayed calm today," he murmured to the horse. Sultan responded with a soft nuzzle, his trust in Armin evident. For Armin, moments like this were the true reward. The horses were safe, the tourists had learned an important lesson, and the delicate balance between humans and animals had been maintained. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the historic site, Armin reflected on the day. He thought about the curiosity of humans, the intelligence of horses, and the lessons that could be learned when the two interacted with care and respect. Every visitor who left with a newfound understanding had taken something valuable with them, a story, a lesson, and a memory that would last long after the visit ended. By the time the last visitors departed, Armin had returned Sultan to the stables. The horse's coat gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight, his eyes calm and gentle. Armin fed him some hay, speaking softly about the day's events. Sultan nuzzled his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. The near incident earlier in the morning had ended without harm, but it had served as a reminder of the responsibilities that come with interacting with animals. Armin sat on a nearby bench, watching the empty pathways. The silence of the site was different now, filled with reflection rather than excitement. He thought about the tourists, especially those who had tested the boundaries. They had learned something important about safety, respect, and the true nature of the horses. He hoped that their lesson would last longer than the day, that it would influence how they treated animals in the future. Even as the historic site prepared to close for the day, Armin knew that new visitors would arrive tomorrow, eager and curious. He would continue to guide them, teach them, and protect the horses with the same care and patience he had shown today. The lesson of respect, after all, was never-ending. And for the young tourists, the day's events would be a memory they carried forever. A story of excitement turned into understanding, curiosity transformed into respect, and a reminder that even small actions could have big consequences. The afternoon had passed, and the sun began to sink toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the ancient stone walls of the historic site. The pathways, once filled with the chatter and laughter of tourists, were now calmer. Families and groups were slowly leaving, taking with them the memories of the day, some filled with excitement, others with reflection. Armin walked slowly alongside Sultan, both horse and handler moving gracefully through the quiet grounds. The events of the morning had stayed in his mind. Even though nothing serious had happened, he knew how close the situation had come to turning dangerous. It was a reminder that care, patience, and respect were essential whenever humans and animals interacted. Armin often reflected on how people can be so curious and eager to connect, but without understanding, even small actions can lead to big consequences. Today had been a day of learning, both for the tourists and for him. As they walked, Armin noticed a family lingering near a bench. The father was speaking softly to his children, pointing towards Sultan as the horse moved calmly nearby. "See," he said, "we have to respect the rules. Even though he looks calm and friendly, he's strong and sensitive. If we don't give him space, we could get hurt or scare him." The children nodded quietly, their wide eyes fixed on the horse. One of the children asked, "Why did some people try to touch him earlier?" The father explained. They didn't understand at first. They were curious. But the horse's handler taught them why it's important to respect him. Horses have feelings too, just like us. Armin smiled to himself. It was moments like these that made his work meaningful. The lessons learned by tourists, especially the young ones, were small steps toward understanding animals and their world. Respect and patience were values that he hoped visitors would carry with them long after leaving the site. Meanwhile, the young tourists from the morning, the group that had almost caused the tense incident, sat quietly on a bench, sipping water, and reviewing the photos they had taken from a safe distance. Daniel, the young man who had reached out to Sultan, was thoughtful, staring at the horse as if seeing him in a new light. "I feel different now," Daniel said quietly to his friends, Sarah and Leo. "This morning I just wanted to touch him. I thought it would be fun, harmless. But now I understand. There's so much more to respect, to think about. It's not just about excitement, it's about responsibility." Sarah nodded, still watching Sultan carefully. "I know. I didn't want to touch him either, but seeing what could have happened, it really makes you think. I feel like I've learned something important today." Leo added, "And it's not just about this horse or this place. It's about all animals. You can't just assume it's safe to touch or play with them. You have to understand them, respect them, and follow the rules." Armin overheard them and walked over, smiling warmly. "That's exactly right," he said. "Curiosity is good, but respect is essential. When you follow the rules, everyone stays safe, and the animals are happier too. Horses, like all animals, respond to care and patience. They notice how we behave, and they trust those who respect them." Daniel looked at Armin thoughtfully. "I never realized how much trust is involved. He trusted you, and if we hadn't stepped back, I can't imagine what could have happened. I feel lucky we learned this lesson before anything bad happened." Armin nodded, his gaze softening. "Yes. That's why rules exist, not to limit your experience, but to guide you. Every visitor who learns this helps keep the tradition alive. It's not just about today, it's about a lifelong understanding of animals and the respect they deserve." Sultan, sensing the calm atmosphere, lowered his head slightly, as if listening to the conversation. He moved with gentle grace, his steps measured and precise. Daniel reached out a hand cautiously, stopping just short of the horse's space. He did not touch him, but simply observed, marveling at the horse's strength and composure. It was a gesture of appreciation, not interference. Armin watched closely, satisfied with the gesture. "That's perfect," he said softly. "You don't need to touch to appreciate. Respect, observation, and understanding are just as meaningful." Nearby, other visitors began to notice the interaction. They paused, observing how Daniel, Sarah, and Leo had learned from the morning's events. The quiet, thoughtful behavior of the young tourists became a small lesson for others, a reminder that animals deserve patience and care. Parents pointed to the scene, explaining to their children that respecting animals' boundaries is part of being responsible and compassionate. As the afternoon moved into early evening, the historic site became even quieter. The last few tourists walked slowly toward the exit, carrying souvenirs, photographs, and stories of their day. The horses, calm and disciplined, were guided back to the stables by their handlers. Armin walked with Sultan, speaking softly about the events of the day, praising the horse for remaining calm even in tense situations. Sultan nuzzled his shoulder in response, a gentle acknowledgement of their bond. Reflecting on the day, Armin thought about how much human behavior could affect animals. Curiosity, while natural and often positive, must always be tempered with understanding and respect. Today, he had seen excitement, tension, fear, and ultimately awareness. The near accident with Sultan had become a valuable teaching moment, not just for the tourists, but for everyone observing the events. Even as the visitors departed, Armin knew that their lesson would carry forward. Daniel, Sarah, and Leo walked away with a deeper appreciation for animals and their boundaries. They understood that excitement and curiosity were important, but only when balanced with responsibility. The experience had transformed them, leaving a memory that would last long after their visit ended. Armin returned Sultan to the stables, carefully checking his equipment and feeding him some hay. He spoke softly to the horse, recounting the day's events and praising his calm behavior. Sultan responded with gentle movements and soft snorts, indicating that he had understood and appreciated the reassurance. Armin knew that every day with these horses brought lessons in patience, trust, and connection. Later, as the site prepared to close for the day, Armin took a moment to walk alone along the quiet stone pathways. The sun dipped low, bathing the historic walls in a warm golden light. He reflected on the tourists, the horses, and the delicate balance between human curiosity and animal care. Each day was a reminder that learning and respect could go hand in hand, and that small actions could have meaningful consequences. Daniel, Sarah, and Leo paused at the exit, taking one last look at the site. Daniel spoke quietly to his friends. "I think we've learned more than just about the horses. We've learned about responsibility, respect, and awareness. I'll never forget this day." Sarah nodded. "Yes, it's a lesson we can carry with us anywhere." Respect is important, not just with animals but with everyone and everything around us. Leo smiled, looking back at Sultan in the distance. "I feel grateful we got to see it all safely, and I feel proud that we learned something real, not just fun." As the young tourists walked away, Armin watched them go with a quiet sense of satisfaction. He knew that their understanding would influence not only how they interacted with animals in the future, but also how they approached respect and care in general. It was a small but powerful victory, one that reinforced the purpose of his work and the importance of maintaining safety and harmony between humans and animals. By evening, the historic site had emptied completely. The pathways were silent, the horses resting peacefully in their stables. Armin took one last look around, satisfied that the day had ended well. He reflected on the lessons of the day, curiosity balanced with respect, excitement tempered with caution, and understanding replacing ignorance. And as he prepared to leave, he knew that tomorrow would bring new visitors, new curiosity, and new opportunities to teach, guide, and protect the horses. But the memory of this day, the lesson learned by Daniel, Sarah, Leo, and many others, would remain, a quiet reminder of the importance of respect, awareness, and understanding. For the visitors, the lesson was clear. Excitement and curiosity are wonderful, but respect, patience, and awareness are essential. For Armin, it was a reaffirmation of his purpose, to protect the horses, guide the visitors, and ensure that every interaction between humans and animals was safe, meaningful, and respectful. And as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting the historic site in gentle twilight, Armin stood quietly with Sultan, reflecting on the day's events. The horses were calm, the visitors had learned, and the lessons of respect, patience, and trust would continue to live on long after the gates had closed. It was a perfect ending to a day of curiosity, tension, learning, and reflection, a story that would stay with everyone involved, teaching them the value of respect, the power of observation, and the importance of understanding the living world around them.